The 1995 military satire Major Payne is the topic on this, the final episode for Season 5 of the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. To celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States, the Everything is a Primary Source podcast is taking to the road. This summer, I will travel from Chicago to Colorado Springs, recording place-based podcast episodes and collecting short oral histories from members of the public along the way. This is not a retrospective project. It is a living one, built on the idea that history is not only something we inherit, but something we actively create. Visit everything-history.com/America250 to see how you can get involved in this public history initiative. Welcome to the Everything is a Primary Source podcast, the show where we navigate history through popular culture. I'm your host, Eric Salmonson. I'm a social studies teacher, historian, and pop culture enthusiast. Each episode, I sit down with everyday people to discuss the media, objects, places, and events that shape us and reveal what they say about the past, as well as who we are now. The Everything is a Primary Source podcast is, therefore, your history, my history, our history through popular culture. So I'd like to welcome Stephen Martini to the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. You know Stephen from in front of the camera and behind the camera and really the entire process of movie and TV making. You're an actor, you're a writer, you're a producer. We first got to know you as Cadet Alex Stone in 1995's Major Payne. And sounds like in the rumor mill, there's a pretty interesting quasi-sequel to that movie that you're making yourself. And if we could just, if you're allowed to, just talk a little bit about Major Stone. Is that something that we should keep our eyes and ears out for?
Well, it's interesting that, you're talking about artifacts and stuff because, for the last 30 years, I've had fans asking me, what happened to Alex Stone after Madison, after the games, after the Virginia military games, where did he go? And so, that movie has taken on a real cult following over the last three generations. As I say, when people ask me, like when it first came out in the 90s, it was I think it was well received amongst fans and stuff, but as these things go, uh, marketing and promotion and stuff, and it needs to be really pushed behind the film in order for it to make a lot of more money than people you know it needs to basically cross back then it needed to cross like $100 million mark,
Mhm.
and then it would be considered, oh my God, this is a breakaway runaway hit.
Yeah.
um, but Major Payne, as these things go, it kind of it took time to build up, and now it's kind of more popular than it ever really was. So all throughout that time, I've been thinking about my character, like where would he be? So as a screenwriter, as my training is to think about these things, I had an idea that really popped and made me go, okay, this is something that I can really sit down and write and do. And if I have to do it in a small way, I can, because it's focused on my character, Stone, where he is today, and what happens when he returns home to Virginia and runs into some old green boys. And how does each character feel about their original controversial mentor, Benson
I
Winifred Payne?
I love that idea so much. It's so modern to think that way of because the movie ends basically setting up a sequel. Like they introduce a bunch of new interesting characters and you see Major Payne interacting with them and you can see he's changed a bit, but there's still enough oddness about him that it could set up Major Payne 2 in 1997. But they don't do that. But I think it's such a cool idea for you to be like, okay, let's let's catch up with these guys 30 years later and how's the world treated them. And it's such a unique and very 2020s thing of plucking media from other time periods and not the obvious ones and say let's do something with this, let's build on something from before.
Well, there's so much richness there. A great example that did it right and respectfully was Cobra Kai. Did that with the Karate Kid movies, and they really brought the Cobra Kai verse. They made it way more deeper and richer. And I think that the same thing in the Pain verse, you can do that and bring back these characters and expand on upon Pain himself. Even in my script, there's a rumor that he even had his own family and that there's other Pains out there, if you know what I'm saying. So like it opens the door for this whole, today it's so interesting to me because now we're at the point where somebody like Stone is the age of where he would be the mentor, right? And so what's interesting to me is like looking around today and how do you become the mentor that the world needs you to be? And and all you have to go on is the insane people around you that are claiming to be mentors. And so, like, how do you center yourself and find your own mentorship so that you can be there for other people?
Yeah, I mean, we barely got much of a backstory of Stone in the original film, so you really have like a wide open canvas to work with. You could do a lot with that character, and
Oh
and
yeah, no, and it's so interesting because again, his archetype was the rebel archetype. So it's like, what do you do now when you're midlife, almost 50, and like, the rebel inside of you, where does he go? And how do you apply the notion of rebellion and towards a system that is already completely dysfunctional, you know? So it's really but it's interesting because if being on the other side of the coin now, I'm a dad myself, and being an adult and being somebody, even as a filmmaker, as a director, you have to stand up and kind of be a mentor and be that thing that I often think about that movie Major Payne, where that arc of my character, it really stayed with me. Like, it's the reason why it's so, I think, timeless is because it was so well written in that way. It was constructed in a way where the
yeah,
arcs of the characters just, it's just really meaningful.
I love it. I mean, and to be honest with you, when it came out, I was 14 years old, and I think it just kind of fit in with all the other films that were just like it at the same time. I had a kind of a rule put on me back then that it couldn't go to the movies unless it was like a big, like Dances with Wolves, big type movie. We didn't have a lot of spare money laying around. Once I made my own money, I could get to the theaters myself. I saw everything. But so I didn't see it in the theater, and then when it arrived in the video store, which was Video Store, HBO, those were like the other landing spots after it hit the movies. I think it just kind of fell in with all the other similar ones. So I just kind of was like, oh, Major Payne. Maybe I'll see it someday. Maybe I won't. Watching it yesterday in preparation for this, I'm like, that movie is really freaking funny. And it's great because it hits those archetypes perfectly. Like it has everything. And you know what it reminded me a lot of is a combination of a couple things, including Heartbreak Ridge from 10 years earlier with Clint Eastwood, where he's a Marine. He has to train these ragtag group of guys. A little bit more serious movie, obviously. It's like Major Payne's kind of like the JV version of that.
Yeah,
And
right.
it all, and of course, the Mighty Ducks shows up in my mind when I think about that. Gordon Bombay, reluctantly takes on this ragtag group. Bad News Bears, all those similar type stories. I even saw a bit of Ace Ventura in it, which, having Major Payne as being like he's the real cartoon character. Everybody else in the movie is pretty normal. I mean, some of the kids, like your character is, like you said, the rebel. He has a leather jacket on, and the overweight kid always has snacks with him all the time, and a little bit cartoonish, but nothing compared to him. And just like that, the year before Ace Ventura shows up, he's out of his mind and is, Mr. Rubberface and all that, but everybody else around him is normal. And so there's really no matchup for that in either movie. Like there's nobody, even like the bad guy in Ace Ventura isn't a deranged version of him, and there's no Major Pain, that he's going up against. It's himself that he's really struggling
Right.
with.
It's so interesting, right? I'm kind of the nemesis. I'm kind of the antagonist. Stone
Yeah,
is kind of
and
like the,
and then you fall in
so
line behind him
right.
at some
Right.
point. And so it's like the real conflict is just how do we win um this competition? And then I thought about it. I'm like, we could really stir up some conspiracy theory stuff because he mentions Ace Ventura at the very end when the kid has the seeing eye dog. And he's like, "Who are you, Ace Ventura, pet detective?" And I was like, "Well, I guess that means in his world that's a real movie, unless Ace Ventura is a real person." And he just watched the last Super Bowl and saw this guy, save the day. And so and I'm like, well, two guys from In Living Color, I think that contributes to these movies being so similar. They both had a similar background. Damon Wayans and Jim Carrey were both alum of that same pretty radical show in the late 80s, early 90s. But when this movie was being made, I know you weren't behind the process because you auditioned for it, but as far as you know, were things like the success of an Ace Ventura, is that part of the reason why a movie like that was greenlit to be made in 1995?
Yeah, I think that was the era. You got to understand. I mean, you do understand because you were there. Like In Living Color was like the coolest thing around. It was like cooler than Saturday Night Live. It was like, the MTV version of like sketch comedies, and those guys were like rock stars. They were badasses. And so like that was like the pool that Hollywood was pulling from that, and the bigger stars that came out of those shows, they were definitely, interested in funding them in films. So I do think that there's absolutely a tie there. It's funny you mentioned that because we're on the same page with that because in my Major Stone script, there's a rumor. There's lots of rumors about what happened to Major Payne because he's disappeared. People don't know where he is right now. So, so one of the rumors is that the Marines had him training some top secret mission, a cadre of dolphins off the island of Catalina Island, and that was the last place he was seen. So the idea of Major Payne, because they train dolphins to do these marine exercises,
Yeah.
and so I just kept thinking about this hilarious, just I can't stop giggling thinking about Major Payne somehow having some weird call sign communications with dolphins going on, and like
Well,
they
that's
set them on some.
such a fun thing about that movie is scene to scene, you don't know how he's going to react to these different situations, and he seems to have like a different like I just when he's on the date and she asks him what he does for fun, he's like, I blindfold myself and put together my gun as fast as I can until my nose bleeds. I'm like, I was not expecting that. I thought from earlier in the movie he was going to say something about, you know, just killing somebody and like that, but it works so well. So him with dolphins and what he would say to them would be
That's
just
just like comedy gold.
yeah, it's
Just one little,
perfect.
it's one little moment, but I'm on the same page with you there as far as the Ace Ventura-ish of the situation. I mean, look, the reality of movie business and IP is you'd have to combine, whoever owns the rights to that and Jim Carrey, of course, unto himself. But I think the point is that there's just so much room, richness there for these characters. Like, you can go almost any which way and make it funny and make it meaningful. And of course, someone like Damon Wayans, once he gets involved, he's gonna have his own. I'm sure he's got his own ideas. I mean, he's pitched me different ideas over the years for for where they were thinking about taking the character. Um, so it'll be really interesting to see how the whole thing comes together, because it has to be the way these things get made now, you have to kind of have a whole, it's like the Avengers. Everybody has to show up in the same room at
Yeah.
the same time. And then the corporate, CEOs say, yes, we're going to put money behind
They need to
this.
be
Let's
on
go.
board with it. Yeah, and they were definitely like that in 95, I'm sure. What I like about this movie, and it's a satire, it's not a parody. And I think with the way it was marketed, I remember seeing the trailers, they honed in on a lot of the standard military stuff that you would see and kind of the goofball, the few moments of real goofball stuff in the movie, which would put it in the same category, I think, in most people's minds to like Down Periscope or Hot Shots or
That's like a
McHale's
spoof parody.
Navy. Right, those things.
Spoof parody.
And when I watch Major
Stop
Payne,
that.
I'm like, this is a satire. They're taking the serious military movies like your Heartbreak Ridge, and they're this close to it. And that's what I love about that style of humor where it's if he honestly, if he wasn't as weird as he was, if it was made as more of like a drama, it's Dead Poet Society basically, right? It's
Yeah.
a good story. You'd actually care about the story even if it wasn't so silly in a lot of the
I think
parts.
that's honestly that's the line you always want to ride as far as storytelling. If if you got a story that really just threads the needle like that, it's gold, and it's really up to the storyteller to figure out which way to weave in the laughs and the cries, so to speak.
And that was it in the especially the first half of the 90s. It seemed like that's how you made comedy movies back then. Is that you had a solid story, one that people would care about either way. I think of My Cousin Vinny. I mean, I would love that movie even if it was a drama.
Yeah,
But it's hilarious because of the culture class stuff. And Major Payne it would work the same way, where it's like, and it has that richness also, like you said, because it's tied to other existing stories. Wasn't there a movie from like the 40s or the 50s that it's kind of
it's a
loosely based
remake.
on?
It's
Yeah.
a remake of The Private War of Major Benson, a Charlton Heston movie, which was the dramatic version that you're talking about. It wasn't so much of a comedy at all. Um, it was about how this man affected these kids and how they affected him, how they changed him. So, but it's interesting because it's really all about the contrast. You contrast this killing machine who's willing to just resort to all kinds of violence in order to squash out any, pain, so to speak, in his life, against these little soft, weird, goofy kids. And I think anytime you have a strong contrast like that, it's like that's when the story just starts to kind of tell itself.
Is that why your character's name was Stone? Is because like a stone kind of immovable that he's cold, he doesn't really have the feelings. He doesn't wear his feelings on his sleeve as easily. It's harder to get into his mind a little bit more. And because you just said major pain, he's dealing with major pain, and that's why he's the way he is.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I'll certainly take that deep poetic
yeah.
interpretation. I like it. I'll run with it. You know, I'll wear that on my sleeve for Major Stone for sure. But the fact remains is that originally the character's name was Alex Gray. And that's who I auditioned for was Cadet Gray,
Hmm.
Grey. But again, behind the scenes technicalities, there was an artist named Alex Gray. He's actually a really great artist who I know, and I've met him since then. He paints the human body and all these different like auras and very trippy psychedelic stuff, very deep stuff. But I think there was a copyright thing with his name, Alex Gray, as an artist and Alex Gray as a character. And so they just changed the name to Alex Stone after I got the part. So for me, I just showed up and they're
Yeah.
like, your name's Stone now. So I'm like, okay, great. I'll
I
run
I
with it.
love I love that behind the scenes stuff. I mean, gray would have worked too because gray, black and white, kind of in between.
Right. And Stones are great, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and stones usually are too. I love that kind of stuff that we as the audience would never know about. Even if you did a behind the scenes feature, we would never know. I mean, is it common on a set or in the movie making process where decisions like that can be just made so kind of casually, be like, okay, you're stoned now, go with that.
Yeah, well, it's usually, you're in the rush to pre-production. They were in a rush to like get everything together. So it's like, we gotta go, we gotta go. And then it's all about, the fact checkers and, the crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. They 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 start to pile up a list of all these things, and that was one of the things that they were not able to reconcile. So yeah, they have like an internal kind of process. The creators, especially the writers and director and Damien, I'm sure they'll talk about it, and then but then that's up to the writer. Dean Lorry, changed the name himself, and so he's an amazing writer. So I trust whatever he comes up with. Um, so but there's definitely that's all just part and parcel of the process of constantly fact checking and making sure, when you're in media, all the copyright and stuff, especially in the big corporate level, just has to have your ducks in a row so
Yeah.
that the value can be extracted from it, basically.
I think that's an interesting dynamic of just Hollywood in general and any kind of media creation. And it seems very fast and loose now. It's not. I know that for a fact, especially from the teaching side of things, that copyrights are still serious matters. You can't just do what you want with them, kind of thing. And um, as can
You
only
can't
imagine it,
you can as a parody on the
right?
internet.
Yeah, like there's certain things that, yeah, you can do a parody, you can do, from in my world, if it's kept in local in-house for educational purposes, but I think people tend to see the easy creation on their phones, on their computers as a green light to just, I'm going to take that and make it my own. It's like, well, you got to hold on. And I can only imagine in the 90s. I mean, by that point, Hollywood had developed, like you said, corporate level. I mean, you have people whose entire job it is to cross their T's and dot their I's and make sure that you're not making a movie with Alex Gray waiting to sue you for using his name
Right.
without permission. I remember hearing about that on there's a character played by Jean Smart on Frasier that originally she was Lana Landley, and then turns out there's a real person by that name, and they're like, oh, that's must have where I came up with it. So we have to change it to Lorna or vice versa or something like that.
Right.
And to my understanding, that's even one of the reasons why Hollywood, California became the home for movie making so early on, is because it was so far away from Washington, D.C., where all the copyrights are held, that they were making movies based on stories that they didn't own the rights to. And as a way to not be having the federal government breathing down their neck, hey, if we're all the way on the other side of the country in the Wild West, who's going to stop us until it's too
Yeah, well,
late, kind of
it
thing.
was it wasn't just the spooks in Washington, D.C. It was the New Jersey tough guys.
Yeah, the Edison
And
boys, right?
yeah, Thomas Edison's guys, they had all the basically they were like a techno mafia over all the equipment that they invented, the cameras and stuff. So if you wanted to make a movie, you had to go to those guys. And of course, every scrappy filmmaker that I know does not like to ask permission from people to make their movies. So, they all ran out west to get away from Edison, and that's how Hollywood started. It's a great story too. It's actually a fascinating history. I'm surprised nobody's made a film about that. But it's interesting you say that about, you know, the copyright thing is such a thing because like even if like I wrote Major Stone, right? And like if I was to just make that like I just made a film called Bittersweet that I wrote and
Yeah,
directed myself. And I could just go out and make a movie like that, because I own the characters and the rights. If I do that for Major Stone, I would have to, in order for it to be promoted and marketed as connecting to Major Payne, you have to get the copyright and the IP from Universal. Or else it would just be like Major Jones. I'd make up a different guy and kind of, you could do the same story about a soldier returning home to his old friends and stuff. Um, and if Universal does not want to give the rights or they're too expensive, then my only choice would probably be to go to YouTube and make like some kind of a parody version of it.
yeah,
And a lot of people seem to be getting some traction or hits that way. It's interesting times, to have to at least have those options because again, it's like we're talking about Edison, New Jersey moving to Hollywood, and now everybody's just kind of moving to YouTube and the internet right here.
yeah.
So
I mean, if we
it's
look at things
fascinating.
in 30-year increments like that, because we go back in time roughly 30 years, 95, 96. I mean, Hollywood it's in its stride. I mean, the 90s was such a good time for movies of all genres. It was in its stride. If you go back the clock 30 years before that in the mid 60s, Hollywood was not doing very well. TV was beating it up so much. People were more interested in television. Movies were just not as I mean, there's some decent ones from the 60s, but nothing like that. And now you move ahead 30 years, and like you just said, there's so many options. If you any story, it's like, okay, I could either just straight up put it on YouTube myself, or I could make it a series, or I could make it a
Well,
standalone
that's
movie. And then you have all these movie channels. You don't even have to put in the theaters. You can, I mean, it's
but
pretty
that's kind
remarkable.
of how that's why when we started the original part of this conversation was talking about the marketing and the promotion, for the original Major Payne, which 30 years ago, it's a different way to market and promote something. They have to put all their corporate money in the outlets, the big media outlets back then. And nowadays it's even harder to spend money to promote something to get it seen. So that just what you're saying, it's like how do you the noise level is so much higher. How do you become a signal within the noise that people go, oh yeah, I want to see that. It's a real challenge, and it's just so interesting because as an artist, I never even really thought that way. I always thought, oh, it's about the concept, the character, and the story, and then everything else will kind of work itself out when you figure it out. But nowadays, it really seems like you have to think backwards almost. You have to
Yeah.
retroactively think first about the marketing, which is, kind of insane to me creatively, but it's just a whole other muscle to use.
It used to be I mean, I'm just an observer. I've never actually obviously made a movie. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting in a garage doing a podcast. But um, it seems like a very,
Hmm.
straightforward step by step thing. Concept, get a cast, get a direct, just move it on. And that marketing would be midway up and then definitely like towards the end of the line. But yeah, I think now it's like you start with the marketing, like what can we market? And then
It's
we'll
it's it's
design it
just
from
so
there.
bizarre because it's like the old Hollywood truism, like nobody knows anything. Like people can just confidently say, "Oh yeah, this will sell and this will be a big hit," but like nobody has any idea. And it's just there's so much sort of BS finagling going on with that. Again, as a creative for the longest time, you kind of resent the marketers because the marketers kind of they don't sell the movie, they don't know what they're doing. Like how do they? So it's just interesting how the creatives have to become the marketer now. And it's really so much is out of your hands. It's like the masses and the timing and the weather. Who knows? It's like it's fascinating.
From my point of view, what we're talking about ultimately is, because my show is called Everything's a Primary Source, everything is an artifact. And this seems like, we're making artifacts in real time every time we make media. This podcast that we're doing right now is technically an artifact of June 2026, and people could study it if they wanted to, and make understand something from it. And so when you even have a dilemma of how to even like what medium to use this and how to approach it, I mean, that says a lot about any time period. In 1995, things were a lot more straightforward, right? I mean, you have this concept driven basically by Damon Wayans. Like, if it wasn't for him, chances are they wouldn't have thought to make this movie. And if you also didn't have, I think the overall, because one thing I noticed about Major Payne is that even though it's very militaristic, it's military centered, it's not like a gung-ho patriotic movie. They barely ever mention, patriotic themes. It's all about himself and his own career,
No, but it's
and then
it's interesting. If over the years, man, I'm telling you, so many soldiers and people who serve, they constantly hit me up. They're like, dude, this movie saved our asses, made us laugh so much while we're in this shit. And it's like the fact that to be appreciated by the people, the soldiers who are out there doing all the work, all the grunt work and the hard stuff is that's the real gift that we can give them. And I think it's so important. Like we need to be able to yeah, I agree. Like again, like I'm somebody who does not like to hit people over the head with like messages and giant like themes, especially when it comes to politics. Like I'm just very like I just want to tell the story, and if people want to
yeah,
interpret it their way, they can interpret it that way. And I think Major Payne is very respectful like that. But I think it's really important, because the military they need outlets to laugh. Like our soldiers need this stuff, and they need to
yeah.
be able to relate to things. And like when I Major Stone that I wrote the sequel for Alex Stone Coming Home, I gave it to some soldiers that I know to give me some notes about it. And, it deals with a certain amount of PTSD, because that's a natural part of the
Mhm.
conversation. And they were just so happy that I could like make jokes and find ways to bring levity and lightness to this thing that they're dealing with all the time.
Yeah,
And like to me, that's the gift we can give, especially to the military. Like I think they need it. I think that it's like, now more than ever. And that's
yeah.
why I think bringing back this whole world. to give them an outlet and give people stories to entertain, and bring value to it. The military is, dude, it's tough, man. Somebody told me that they enlisted because of my character, you know, and like I was like, wow, that's amazing. I'm honored to have that
Yeah.
effect.
You can only, I mean, movies from that era, and I guess that's what I was trying to say is that it wasn't like it wasn't a propaganda piece from World War II, right? It wasn't like a movie trying to encourage people. It was just kind of like, okay, here is something, when we first meet the guy, he's in South America doing a drug. It wasn't like part of a large war, right? It wasn't even the Gulf War. And then he's about to be deployed to Bosnia, and then that's when he decides, not to go back. So it's not like the 90s was that era. And I grew up in a military, my dad was in the Air Force. And so I grew up around that. And, of course, as the Gulf War was happening, we were all, things we could tell something was up. Like a lot of our dads were going overseas and, everybody was on guard and but then when that was over, things went back to normal and you just kind of, yeah, okay, military is one of many different occupations you can, it's not the same as what it was in the 40s or people's relationship with it in the 60s with Vietnam. So you have this satirical, funny take on it that shows up right in the mid 90s when it's not, war footing time. So then within 10 years, and it is war on terror, Iraq, Afghanistan, those guys can look back and see this era of levity, right? They can kind of joke around with the Major Payne and maybe compare him to people they've known in their work and everything like that. So I think it works so well as not only a product of the time, but also an influence, like you said later on.
It was before 9/11, so
Yeah.
like the whole world definitely, changed after that. And in fact, when that had happened, people were asking me about Major Payne. Like, do you think Major Payne would go back and re-enlist after 9/11? I thought that's a that's a little drastic, but it's kind of funny idea to
Well,
think
it's
that these
kind of like
characters have lived in this whole world for the last 30 years.
it'd be kind of like the Forrest Gump effect because, Forrest
Yeah.
Gump, the movie was based on a book from 86, and then the sequel to it, Gump and Company, was more based on the movie than it was the book because the book is so much different from the movie. And then in the book, he goes back into the military and he ends up in he's the reason why the Berlin Wall comes crumbling down. And because he goes chasing a football on the wrong side of it and starts a riot. And then he does end up going to Iraq and like capturing Saddam Hussein. And it's like and so they
Forrest Gump
place it,
captures.
yeah. And it's such a ridiculous thing. He ends up letting
Does
him
he
go.
go
It's
down in the hole with him? Are you kidding me? He goes
no,
down in the hole?
it take place. It's to happened in 1991, and he gives him up or
Oh, it's
something.
the
I forget
90s.
exactly. It's been a while,
Right,
but
right, gotcha, gotcha.
I love it.
So it was the
Thank you
first
so
Iraq
much.
War.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
first one. Yeah.
gotcha,
Thank you so
gotcha.
much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I think we honestly just scratched the surface of what we could be talking about, and I'd love to have you on another time.
Yeah, man, I
And
love, and honestly, social studies was like my favorite subject. So like I could talk about lots of different things, especially as a
I
screenwriter. My
I was gonna
brain,
say, I think that's why you're such a good screenwriter is because you've paid attention to the humanities. So, Stephen Martini, thank you so much for joining the Everything's a Primary Source podcast.
thank you. Great talking to you.
Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything's a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.